Good morning everyone. Welcome to VLN IAS editorial discussion. Today we are going to have discussion on the topic of India-Sri Lanka relationship and also on the topic of draft disability policy. I welcome you all to the discussion. The first topic is on draft disability policies and the topic related to the following parts of the syllabus, especially in the welfare scheme for vulnerable section and also on the social empowerment aspect. So what is the context? Recently, a draft was published, but it takes into consideration only traditional causes of disability. It remains silent on the other factors like malnourishment, medical negligence, social cultural factors, and environment caused by disasters. So usually the disability is categorized on two types. One is long-term one and short-term one. On this backdrop, it is very much important to know about Right of Person with Disability Act 2016. The Act was a landmark one since it increased the disabilities from 7 to 21. The current legislation, Right of Person with Disability Act, replaced the earlier one, like Persons with Disabilities Act of 1995. It was legislated since India is a signatory of the Convention of United Nations Convention of Persons with Disability. The Act fulfills the commitment made by India based on this convention. The Act is a landmark one since it enabled the number of disabilities from 7 to 21, and also it authorized central government to add more types of disabilities in the future, which makes the Act a very dynamic one and can be changed with time. Are the main 21 disabilities like blindness, low vision, leprosy, hearing impairment, locomotor disabilities, mental illness, autism. Likewise, these are the list of the 21 disabilities. Have a look on that. Okay. Now let's look at the key aspect of the Right of Person with Disability Act 2016. The Act for the first time included speech and language disabilities as an important disability factor. It also enabled acid victims and dwarfism as an important factor of disability. Along with that, three blood disorders like thalassemia, hemophilia, and sickle cell disease are on the disability factor, which may make this a very dynamic one and very inclusive one also. It enables to get additional benefits such as reservation in education, government job, poverty alleviation schemes. It also have enabled provision for right to free education for a child between age group of 6 to 18. Also has reservation in public vacancies. On the administrative setup, it has a district level committees at state government level and also national and state fund for financial support. So enables strict punishment and penalties for offences against the disabilities. Special courts are also set up at each district level for persons with disabilities. So it is in the overall level, it enables the empowerment of persons with disabilities in almost all factors. But what the author says is that everything which included does not take into consideration the political inclusiveness and political empowerment of this category of person with disabilities. So the author says that it is very much necessary to take into consideration the political aspect or political inclusiveness of the person with disability. Since India is part of an Indian strategy, Indian is a place in South Korea, Indian strategy of Asia Pacific Decade of Person with Disability. The Indian strategy enables the decade of 2013 to 2022 as a decade of person with disabilities in the Asia Pacific region. So in prelims, usually you get a question like what this Indian commitment refers to. So it mainly refers to person with disabilities, and also it is very much essential for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. These commitments, earlier the commitments was mainly based on the medical model, like person with disabilities is mainly taken on the medical aspect by providing them with locomotives, enabling them with treatment provisions. But with the coming up of the 2016 legislation, it has changed from a medical model to more human and right-based model. So the current legislation, the name itself suggests the right of person with disability. It is a right-based model. The principle of the draft policies also showcase the commitment of the inclusion and empowerment of persons with disability, and also the policy document also enables a commitment to education, health, skill development, accessibility, and other institutional factors. But all these are good, but the glaring omission in the absence of any commitment to political upliftment of the person with disabilities. The author says that all the enabled factor does not consider the political upliftment of the persons with disability. So what about the political participation? The Article 29 of the Convention clearly says about the political empowerment of the person with disabilities. Also, the engine goals also promote the participation politically and in decision-making process. So, the Right of Person with Disability Act should include these principles within its fold. The anti-discrimination commitment under this Act recognizes the political domain, where the disabled persons should be allowed to realize their human right and fundamental freedom. So in order to realize their fundamental freedom, in this that right to political participation is also part of their fundamental freedom. So it is very much essential to have a political empowerment for the people with disabilities. So for the political empowerment and inclusion of disabled is an issue. India does not have any policy commitment that is aimed at enabling the political participation. The exclusion of disabled persons from the political space happens at all level, like this on the central government level, on the state, and also even on the district level. Also, this disabled persons' political participation is very poor. Usually, we know that only on the administrative side, we will see some of the person with disabilities, like earlier Era Singhal of UPSC, who's with All India rank 1. Likewise, there are many people who have the ability to have a good decision making capability. So the section 11 of the Right to Person with Disability prescribes that the Election Commission of India and State Election Commission should ensure the person with disabilities and all materials related to the electoral process are easily understandable by and accessible to them. You know that one of the main hindrance to this empowerment of person with disability is their accessibility, because many of them are not able to accessible even on the infrastructure aspect. Also our buildings, our public transport, everything is not a good disabled friendly one. So in order to make them empower politically, first we have to focus on the aspect of accessibility, whether it is physical accessibility, whether it is a cognitive one. So we have to also look into the accessibility factor for people with disability. So on the ground reality, we know that many of the political parties do not have much inclusion of persons with disabilities. Many of them don't have, we don't have proper data on how much are there in the political participation area, how many of them are participating. So political representation plays an important role in enhancing the interest of the marginalized community. Even our constitutional makers knew it early. That's why they provided reservation aspect for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe in legislature. We know that the Constitution 5th schedule and 6th schedule is an enabling provision for this. Even a case study on Chhattisgarh, where an initiative is started by nominating at least one disabled person in Panchayat. If the disabled person is not elected, they are nominated as a Panchayat member as per the changes in law is concerned. So it is a very evolutionary one. In order to make the right a real one, the author mainly focused on four-pronged approach. Number one, by building capacity for the disabled persons, especially at the electoral system, government structure, and basic organizational level, and having necessary amendment by removing legal and regulatory hurdles, and also by inclusion of this person in civil society activities and providing a framework for political parties for inclusion of this person with disabilities. So the author concludes by saying that the central and state government should work together and with other stakeholders to make this right a real one and providing more inclusiveness for people with disabilities. This topic is on Sri Lankan crisis. It comes on India and its neighborhood relations topic. So what is the context? Sri Lanka is facing its worst economic crisis, especially on its balance of payment problem. So what is this balance of payment? It is the foreign exchange payment that a country keeps mainly for trading with other countries. The country is currently facing its worst foreign exchange reserve depletion. Even it is very difficult for the country to import its essential consumption goods. Along with that, the pandemic has devastated the tourism industry of Sri Lanka, which was the main earner of their foreign exchange. Now let us look into the background on which how this crisis evolved. Sri Lanka was fighting a civil war for 26 years, especially with its ethnic communities of Sinhalese and Tamilians, mainly on the issue of power devolution and other crises. Post this civil war, the GDP growth rate was very weak. Following this, the country had to bail out a loan from IMF, approximately about $1.5 billion. But the current crisis mainly emerged due to the lack of visionary policies by the political leadership, especially the policies like fertilizer ban, which on overnight shifted the agriculture sector to organic farming, which was a devastating one, so that it even impacted its food production, and also it depleted its foreign currency since the trade was worsened due to these policies. Along with that, the pandemic has impacted the tourism industry also. So along with that, terrorist attack on the Easter of April 2019 has created a bad image on Sri Lanka as a sweet spot of tourism destination, and also the debt trap diplomacy of China made an economic instability in Sri Lanka, so that the Chinese had a huge influence on Sri Lankan's economy. So let us look into the impact this crisis have on India. On the first and foremost side, the impact will be on the economic side. Since Sri Lanka is an immediate neighborhood of India, the economic crisis has a serious repercussion on the investment of Indians made in Sri Lanka, especially the Tata Motors, TVS Motors, which had a good market in Sri Lanka, has stopped its exports. Along with that, the refugee crisis. A lot of refugees are flowing to the coastal states of India like Kerala and Tamil Nadu. Along with the crisis, there are opportunities for India post this crisis. Traditionally, Sri Lanka is famous for its tea and coffee exports and apparel and clothing market. The vacuum created by crisis had enabled the Indian exporters to find a market where the Sri Lanka had created a vacuum, especially in the apparel and clothing market and also in the tea market. Also, Sri Lanka is strategically important for India since the Indo-Pacific policy is gaining importance day by day. Sri Lanka's strategic position on the Indian Ocean is very much important for India's diplomacy is concerned. Also, the string of pearl in order to counter the Chinese string of pearls policies, it is very much essential for India to have a stable Sri Lanka on the Indian Ocean. How Sri Lanka can overcome this crisis? The primary factor is that it can overcome this crisis only by gaining the trust of its citizens. For that, it is very much essential for the country to implement the democracy in its true spirit. Since the administration has been militarized by the post government, it is very much essential to gain the trust and also revive the economy by increasing the agriculture productivity and better implementation of the reforms, and also bringing back the tourism sector. And also, since India has a big brother role for its neighbors, the neighborhood first policy is an important aspect of India's foreign policies. India can play an important role in reviving the economy of Sri Lanka, especially the Sri Lankan presence in the multilateral forums like G20 is very important for India's economic stature is concerned, and also for its geopolitical stability in the region. In order to bring back to its earlier trajectory, one of the important steps that Sri Lanka must do is to get a bailout from IMF. Only then it can restore to its macroeconomic stability and safeguard its foreign exchange reserve and also implement structural reforms. And there is huge prospect for circular economy. So what is the circular economy? Usually after the production, the whole process will bring back again to the production area. This is very much essential and a good prospect for sustainable development is concerned. Also gaining the trust of people and implementing the democratic spirit in its true sense. Only future can tell how Sri Lanka will evolve by overcoming this crisis. So this is mainly the string of pearls policies of Chinese. They are building ports on the coastal parts of Sri Lanka, especially the Tirakonamada port and also the Hambantota port, which makes a strategic location on the Indian Ocean region.